I feel like Dutch Vanderlyn right now because I got a plan to maximize my reading experience with the next thick boy book that I'll be reading. I'm going to detail that for you today, and I'll talk over how I've implemented this plan before with success. And while you're here, likes, subs, ringing the bell, checking out my premium bindery community. As always, that is appreciated but not required. But I'd be a bad content creator if I didn't say it. Right, so here is the deal. Shogun by James Clavell has been weighing down my bookshelf for far too long. I've come really close to picking it up a few times, but ultimately didn't feel that I was in the right headspace for it. Like, you really have to commit to a beefer like this. But it is what I've dubbed for myself the year of the thick boy, and I've taken down several 500-page books this year, and I've also taken down some big boy series like the History of the Third Reich trilogy by Richard J. Evans, which totals 2,500 pages. I just finished the Dandelion Dynasty fantasy series by Ken Liu, which clocks in at 3,500 pages. I also capped off Live Ship Traders by Robin Hobb, which is around 2,700 pages. And even outside of those series, like I've finally got into Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry and loved every single one of the 843 pages. Now, I mentioned Lonesome Dove here because this is where I really honed in and perfected this idea that I'm going to try with Shogun. I'm not the first one to do this, but like for me, it's new. So towards the end of last year, I started my third playthrough of Red Dead Redemption 2. If you're not a gamer or you've been living under a rock, this is an open world video game that is set during the decline of the Wild West. Think Grand Theft Auto with horses, and you play as Arthur Morgan, who has been at this gang life for a long time. And the emotional weight of his story and his arc is, in my opinion, one of the greatest achievements in gaming history. There are moments from that damn game that will stick with me forever. And that playthrough took me about 3 months. It's a long-ass game with a lot to do, and I got a lot to do in my regular life, so I just kind of like pecked away at it. And as I was in the middle of it, probably around chapter 3, that's when I decided to pick up what many consider to be the best Western of all time, the 1986 Pulitzer Prize winner for fiction, Lonesome Dove. And just like with Red Dead, it's the characters that made this baby work for me. And look, I've done a full review for this in my January wrap-up. I've talked about it several times on my other channels. The basic plot is, it's a cattle drive, but it's so much more than that. And now it's one of my favorite books of all time. And I love that it got an adaptation because right after finishing it, I watched the 4-part miniseries from 1989, which also is considered by many to be like the greatest Western TV productions ever made. This allowed me to like stay in that world for just a little bit longer and stay in this like Western vibe while I continue to progress through Red Dead. Then in February, I added another book to that rotation, True Grit by Charles Portis, which was published in 1968. So an oldie, but a goodie. This is a Western revenge tale following the 14-year-old Maddie Ross as she sets out to avenge the murder of her father. And in doing so, she links up with an alcoholic U.S. Marshal and a young Texas Ranger. And this is another where the characters just made the book for me because Maddie is such an incredibly strong protagonist. I gave this 4 stars. I had a darn good time. And I also followed that up with the 2010 Coen Brothers film adaptation, which was largely faithful to the book and rocked pretty hard. Don't ask me about the John Wayne film, though. Not happening. Anyway, this whole rack of media, right? Red Dead Redemption 2, Lonesome Dove, True Grit, the adaptation, the Lonesome Dove miniseries, the 2010 True Grit film. Oh, and a rewatch of the HBO series Deadwood, which was incredible. Highly recommend it. Ian McShane was brilliant in it. Timothy Oliphant and Molly Parker were also great. Anyway, all of that combined gave me such a heightened experience, and I want that same experience while I read Shogun. And I think because of how closely related those two periods are in terms of how they're portrayed in various types of media, that I should be able to pull that off. Like, they definitely have their cultural differences, but I see a lot of crossover with the samurai period and the Wild West, especially when you think of things of like honor, violence, and survival, the codes that they impose on themselves, or even when you consider that Akira Kurosawa's films have directly inspired Westerns and vice versa, right? So what I'm going to do here is lay out my plan with a bunch of sidebars where I talk about other pieces of media that I've consumed and would recommend. I'll summarize my plan at the end, but I don't want to leave any stones unturned. If you have any additional recommendations, hit me with them in the comments because this is a fluid situation, heavily subject to change. I also want to know if you've done anything like this before and what combination you use to like unlock the experience that I'm chasing here. So first, the basics. Shogun takes place in Japan, starting in the year 1600. It's a historical fiction novel. There's an English navigator shipwrecked off the coast. This is the first Englishman to set foot in the country, and he gets in the mix with the struggles of the late Sengoku period, also known as the Warring States period, which is a bloody era of Japanese history that spans from the mid-15th century to early 17th century. You're talking like constant civil war, shifting alliances, central authority is broken down, and so on. Sidebar here for another brilliant book for this period. It's one of my favorite history books of all time. This scholarly work, Sengoku Jidai, Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, and Ieyasu, Three Unifiers of Japan, by Danny Chaplin. It is not an easy read. Again, scholarly work, very academic in its tone, but there is no better book that I found that details this whole span of history, and it's riveting stuff once you get locked in. I also started off like earlier with some breezy ones by Jonathan Clements, A Brief History of Japan and A Brief History of the Samurai. They're not like anything to write home about, but they'll get you acclimated to the water temperature, right? So having read those, I am coming in with what I feel like is a sufficient base of knowledge. Now, if you want something easier to kind of dip your toe into this period, you could also do something like the Netflix documentary series Age of Samurai, Battle for Japan. And I want to heavily qualify this recommendation by saying, while a great intro for a casual audience, historical television documentaries like this are pretty notorious for their lack of historical accuracy, to put it lightly. They do a lot of little things wrong and even some big things wrong, or they will sacrifice like important context to create a more buzzworthy story. But if you're going for the vibe of it, you could add that to the rotation. Now, what finally convinced me to pick up Shogun was last weekend I started playing the video game Ghost of Tsushima. I had played this before but hadn't finished it. Life got in the way and I just spent too much time away from it to jump back in and know what I was doing. Like I didn't want to relearn all the controls in the middle of the game. So I just started recently at the very beginning. I did this on Saturday. And I think I put in like 7 hours and then I put in like 5 more hours on Sunday. By the way, nobody asked like, how do you game so much? Like they do with reading. Like, how do you read so much? How do you game so much? It's the same thing. It's just what you prioritize. That aside, for context, I'm shooting this on a Wednesday and I just unlocked Moonstance and am about to travel to the second region. So I think I've made some like proper progress and I've done a lot of side quests. Like I love finding those little fox dens and the bamboo cutting spots. So I am easily distracted from the main quests. This game takes place in 1274 during the first Mongol invasion of Japan. You play as a samurai and you basically have to fight back to protect people in this big open world adventure. This game is freaking cinema, man. I mean, the look is outstanding. The voice acting is great. The sword fights are immersive. It's a beautiful game from stem to stern. So this will be a companion for me through the duration of my read of Shogun. And I mentioned that time period, though, late 13th century for the game. I bring that up because if you want something more in line with the time frame of Shogun, you could always go with Assassin's Creed Shadows, which I think takes place around 1580 or something like that. So the late stages of the Sengoku period. I might play that after Ghost of Tsushima. We'll see. All right, so that covers the video games. But what else can we do to add to the overall experience? For starters, it's been over a year since I've read that Sengoku Jidai book, and I could use a refresher. So for that, I am turning to The War in Japan. Let's get that gloss off there. Let's get that right angle there. The War in Japan, 1467 to 1615 by Stephen Turnbull. And I'll get cracking on this like either this week or next. This is a pretty thin overview of the whole period. No idea if it would work for beginners. I haven't read it yet. I don't know if it assumes prior knowledge from its readers. But again, this is going to be a refresher course for me, so I should be fine. Now, I've always got 3 reads going simultaneously. 1 fiction, in this case Shogun. 1 nonfiction, in this case The War of Japan. And 1 manga. And for that, I have been slowly pecking my way, this is another shiny one, slowly pecking my way through the first few volumes of Vagabond. This is another that takes place in the exact period that we're exploring in Shogun. Like the opening scene of Vagabond is the end of the Battle of Sekigahara, which took place in 1600. And this important battle gave rise to the Tokugawa shogunate that would rule for roughly 250 years. And in the manga, we have 2 survivors who are trying to achieve greatness, including a character that is directly based on the character Miyamoto Musashi from Eiji Yoshikawa's novel Musashi, which is a fictionalized account of a real samurai of the same name. So we've got our fiction, our nonfiction, our manga lockdown. Oh, we got some video game options. What about films? I mentioned the intersection between the samurai period and the American Wild West. I have a genre mashup that I love in The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, which is a 2008 film based on Sergio Leone's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly from 1966. But this is really light on the samurai vibe, so I'm going to go with the master, Akira Kurosawa. And there's actually a Kurosawa mode in Ghost of Tsushima, which is like a visual and audio filter to give like that classic Kurosawa film vibe, which I'll probably turn on soon. Anyway, you can pick pretty much any and all Kurosawa here. There's Seven Samurai, which famously inspired the Disney film A Bug's Life. Yeah, I know that sounds like I made it up or I'm gaslighting you, but look it up, it's legit. There's Yojimbo, Ran, which is Kurosawa's reimagining of King Lear, Kagemusha, the list goes on. And I might just work through that entire catalog in chronological order. He's a master. The other film that I'm definitely going to rewatch is 13 Assassins, which is a 2010 film set in the 1840s, where an assembled team of samurai unite to stop a violent and powerful noble and restore order. And it's like the best modern samurai flick that I've seen, and I've seen a fair amount. I'll even throw a nod to The Last Samurai here, and I'd also love any other samurai movie recommendations that you have for me, because we're going all in for this. And just to round this out for an anime, I might rewatch Blue-Eyed Samurai on Netflix, which is brilliant. And I actually need some help here too, because this is where I'm least confident. Like, I watched Afro Samurai back in the day, but I'm pretty lost on the more current stuff. So hit me with some of those. And finally, of course, when we're done reading Shogun, we're going to have to watch the adaptation on Hulu, which has some pretty glowing reviews. And from what I understand, it's supposed to be pretty faithful to the book. So here's the rapid recap of my plan. We're going to read the book Shogun. We're going to read the manga Vagabond. We're going to read the history book, The War in Japan, rewatch a bunch of Akira Kurosawa movies, rewatch the movie 13 Samurais, rewatch Blue-Eyed Samurai, play the Ghost of Tsushima video game, a totally immersive 360-degree samurai experience. I think it's going to be a killer way to do it. And again, I'd love to know if this is something that you've done before, where you just got totally locked in on a culture or a period or whatever, and had this kind of like rounded, fully immersive multimedia experience. But right now, I think that's the foundation of my plan for taking down and getting the most out of reading this beefer, Shogun. I finally need to get to it. I appreciate y'all sticking around and listening to me yap, and I'll see you on the next one.